Hi there, what's up? I hope you guys are doing well. My name is Marley and welcome to my March wrap up. So today, as always in my wrap-ups, we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of March. I managed to complete 7 of the 8 books I planned to read, and I DNF'd that last one. So pretty good month, especially considering I was pretty busy. Now, before we get into the books, I wanted to start sharing reading statistics each month in my wrap-ups, and I did that in January. In February, I completely forgot because I'm not in the routine of doing that. So let me get my computer before I forget, and let's go through some stats from Storygraph, which is a reading website that I use, and it keeps a lot of cool stats on there. Okay, so as I said, 7 books and about 2,600 pages read. Then it shows you the different moods of the books that you read. So for me, the biggest one was funny, which is very interesting. I feel like that is not a typical stat that you would see from me because I do like a lot of thrillers. I feel like I never see people have funny in their top moods, but okay. And then mysterious, and then emotional and adventure, which are more typical moods. As for pace, I read almost all fast-paced and a few medium. For page number, interesting, I only read between 300 and 500 pages, so I didn't read any super long books. All fiction as usual. For the genres I read the most of were young adult, mystery, fantasy, and contemporary in terms of what Storygraph says they are, so kind of all over the place, honestly. My average star rating was only 3.5, which is low for me. I'm typically at a 4, but as you'll see, we had a couple rough ones. Actually, if we put the DNF in here, which I didn't do, it would be even lower. So, and then I'm just gonna check my own monthly stats that I keep on this spreadsheet to see if there's anything interesting. In terms of format, I read 3 ebooks and 4 physical books, no audiobooks because I'm not that kind of girl. As for audience, I had 3 adult, 1 middle grade, 1 new adult, and 2 YA. I read only from cisgender authors this month. In terms of race, I read from 2 black authors and 5 white authors. Yeah, I think we're good for stats then. There's a little sneak peek. Okay, so let's start off with the DNF. Let's start off with the worst and go to the best. So it was the 2nd book in a series. If you guys watched my TBR, you saw I couldn't get it out of this box set, so I'm just gonna hold this whole thing up. I don't know how I got this out earlier in the month, or how I ever will again, but I could not get this out. I attempted to read Eldest by Christopher Paolini, the 2nd book in the Aragon series, and I'm gonna put this down now. Basically, I did this vlog where I read books that I thought I was gonna hate, and you can definitely check that out on my channel if you haven't watched it. But I thought I was gonna hate this book because I hated the first book that I read about a decade ago. And I was right, I really was not enjoying the 2nd book, so I DNF'd it. It was really boring, really bad. Honestly, surprised these books were that popular back in the day, but if you don't know, it's a high fantasy, dragon fantasy series. But I just think the writing was really poor, really boring, and also hard to understand. And no shade to the author, it's impressive to publish a book at the age he did, but I think it shows. I think he was 15 when he wrote the first book, so you can kind of tell. Okay, then I had a book that I rated 1.5 stars, which is probably the lowest I've ever rated a book that I've actually completed. And with that introduction, it was The Zodiac Academy by Caroline Peckham and Susanne Valenti. I think the first book's called The Awakening, but it's the first book in the Zodiac Academy series. I read it for that same vlog of reading books I think that I would hate, and obviously I was right with this prediction. The reason I still read it was it had a really cool synopsis that I really liked the sound of. Essentially, we are following these 2 twin sisters. They are orphans, kind of have not had a great start to life, but they turn 18 and then they get approached by this random man who seems to be stalking them, and he just sort of lays it on them, tells them that they are actually heirs to this magical throne in this magical world of Fae. And so he takes them to this world, and basically in order to get their inheritance, which they obviously want because they're poor, they have to complete the Zodiac Academy, which is the magical school. And if people tell you to read this because of Harry Potter, no, it's not like Harry Potter. Very, very different vibes. But basically this place is rooted in astrology. The school is separated into different elements like air, fire, water, and earth. and everyone has like an affinity for one of those elements. In addition, everyone has an order, which is basically what mythical creature you're gonna be. So some people are vampires, some are werewolves, etc, etc. So our main girls are going into this world. I was really excited. It sounded fun. I love astrology. Unfortunately, if you don't like bully romances, then you cannot read this. It was a very... Peach, stop scratching. It was a very intense bully romance situation. Both of the sisters had point of views and both of them had multiple love interests, which first off was confusing. Second off, the love interests were, I will straight up say, abusive to them. I don't just think it was bullying. I think it was really like too far and made me uncomfortable personally. So that made it really hard to read. Also, I just don't think the writing talent was there either. So it was really a mess. Next up, I read Daughter of the Deep by Riordan, our king, the author of Percy Jackson, and all of these other books back here. Oh, what is this? All of these lovely books back there that I love. This was his newest release from last year, and it actually is a standalone, which might be like his only standalone he's written. It is based on, what is it called? The 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and like some of that old classic literature. But yeah, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and The Mysterious Island, which has the famous character Captain Nemo, which Finding Nemo is named after, clearly. I've heard of Captain Nemo, but I didn't really know much about like what he was from or like his story. But if you know about that stuff and you're into that, then this is kind of like a retelling slash like inspired by those events. Rick obviously is interested in the topic, and that's why he decided to do this. Also, if you really like water, I would recommend this to you. But for me, I did end up only giving it 3 stars, so probably one of my least favorite of his books. In terms of plot, we are following a main character, Anna, and she goes to this school that is, it's like a special school for people who want to specialize in jobs that have to do with water, and they're getting like highly trained, whatever. Her brother also goes there, and she has some friends that are the other characters. Her and her class end up going on this field trip, and while they're away from the school, something really terrible happens back at the school that is sort of like a catalyst to this journey that they then have to go on to basically defeat the rival school that attacked their school. And it's just huge journey. I didn't hate this book. It was cute, like looking back. There were some fun moments. It definitely was a quick read. So if you're worried that you don't want to invest too much time, it definitely was quick for me. I read it in like 2 days, but it was kind of boring. The characters weren't as interesting as his characters normally are. And maybe it's just because it's not a series, so we're not going to get to see more of them, but he does always have cool representation. Oh. Sorry, just my cat. He does always have good representation of certain minorities. Again, if you're looking for that, this is more of a middle grade. So if you want that for like a kid or a younger person in your life, then you know, it's a great book for that. But yeah, it just wasn't like a standout for me or anything. Then we have Act Your Age by Talia Hibbert. Act Your Age Eve Brown, sorry, by Talia Hibbert. This was the final book I read for that blog of reading books I thought I would hate, but I didn't hate it. I gave it 3.5 stars. This is the 3rd book in the Brown sisters romance trilogy. I didn't like Chloe Brown very much. I loved Dani Brown, and this one kind of just fell in the middle for me. If you don't know, it's following Eve Brown, the youngest of the sisters, and she is kind of the one that doesn't have her life really figured out. She keeps switching what she wants her careers to be, and her parents are getting a little sick of it and sick of supporting her in all of these endeavors and her never actually keeping a job for more than like a couple months or something. So when she's upset to learn that they are going to be cutting her off and sort of giving her this ultimatum, she goes to this job interview to be a cook at this B&B, and she ends up making a bad impression on the boss, but then he is desperate for someone, so he ends up going after her, and she accidentally runs him over and injures him. So then he's even more desperate, and she feels bad, so she agrees to work for him. In the meantime, they fall in love. In the meantime, Eve has this whole journey of like figuring out what she's meant to do. It was very cute. I liked both of the characters. They both are actually on the autism spectrum as well, if that's something that you like to read about. The only parts I didn't like was that it does get very steamy. and a little too steamy for me at some points. And the end of the book conflict got pretty annoying. I don't know, I think Talia Hibbert is a good romance writer, but I feel like her end of the book conflicts are always very annoying, and you're just like, they could have avoided this so easily. So yeah, it just kind of gets an average rating for me. Next up, I read The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. I read this for the Buzzwordathon challenge for the month, which was to read a book that has a location in the title, which is Cabin 10. This is a thriller. We are following the main character named Lo. She's a travel author, and one day her house gets broken into when she's there, and it's a very traumatizing experience. But she decides to still go on this work trip even though she's sort of dealing with this trauma. And because of the trauma, it kind of makes her an unreliable narrator a little bit. But she goes on this work trip on this boat, so suddenly we're in an isolated setting. The spooky vibes are coming in there. Ruth Ware is really good at that. Our main character, Lo, meets this girl who's in the cabin next to her, cabin 10. And then during the night, she hears a body get thrown overboard. She believes that this woman has been murdered, but no one believes her. No one knows who this woman was. Only Lo knew about this woman. So it's kind of like she is trying to uncover this mystery on the boat with a whole bunch of, suspects there. It had a great setup, and I really was enjoying this book for most of it. However, maybe halfway through or so, it got pretty boring. Something happens that's happened in one of her other books as well that I didn't love that aspect. She kind of did it again here, and it just kind of slows the book down and ruined it a little bit for me. But what saved it is I did like the twist that it had at the end. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. So I think if you are a fan of Ruth Ware and thrillers in general, you could pick it up, but I also don't think it's like super amazing, ultra special thriller. Great review, great review. Next up, I read Finlay, Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This is a cozy mystery thriller that I've been hearing so much about, and we're following this woman named Finlay Donovan, and she is a writer. However, she hasn't found much success. She's not getting paid very much for her books. Plus, she's having some writer's block. On top of that, her husband was cheating on her and they're now divorced. She just has all these issues because she also has these 2 kids that she's trying to support. So one day she's talking to her agent in a Panera, and they're talking about the book, and she writes like mysteries, like murder mysteries. So they kind of mention something about killing and stuff like that sounds kind of like suspicious. Someone leaves her a note. Basically, they assumed that she was a hit woman, and they were actually talking about real murder, and they want her to go kill this person for them and like hire them to kill this person. Meanwhile, she obviously is not actually a hitman, but they're offering her a lot of money for this. So it's sort of a conundrum of like, is she gonna go through with it? You'll have to read and find out, but it's like this crazy situation that she gets into. All this like madness is constantly happening. That's what makes it funny. It's very like unrealistic, but it's great because it's kind of like a comedy. There's romance. There's actually a really great female friendship, but then there also is like this murder mystery at the backbone of the plot, and you're trying with Finlay to figure it out, and you're rooting for her. I give it 4 stars. I feel like the rave reviews I heard of it like did let me down a little bit. I don't think it was a perfect book like everyone was saying and like the best book ever, but I did really enjoy it and have a fun time, and I definitely will continue on with the series because I know the second book is out, I think. So yeah, definitely a fun one. Next up, I read a YA contemporary / thriller, and that was Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. Sorry, it's ripped a little here. This is inspired by the R. Kelly situation. We're following our main character, Enchanted, and she's about 17 and she really wants to be a singer. She goes to the singing audition, and when she's there, meets this famous singer, Corey Fields. And they begin an inappropriate relationship as she is underage and he is 11 years her senior. How much do they say in the description? I'm wondering how much I should say. Anyways, we're also getting flash forwards to a scene of Enchanted waking up with blood all over and Corey Fields dead. So that is where the thriller aspect comes in, is what happens to lead to that situation. It deals a lot with abuse. It definitely was not an easy book to read. Because it's YA, like I've definitely read harder books to read than this, if you know what I mean. Like My Dark Vanessa, for example, which was about a student-teacher relationship, was very graphic and very, very hard for me to read. This is not as bad as that, as it is meant for a YA audience. It doesn't get as graphic, but it still is very disturbing when you really consider the situation. And the way Tiffany D. Jackson writes it is really effective. You really can understand what Enchanted is going through and feel like you're really there with her. So it was a really, really great book. I gave it 4 stars. A part of me thinks maybe I should give it higher. I don't know why. I just don't feel like it's a 5-star read. I just don't know if I could give such a disturbing book 5 stars, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't know. It's always weird to say you enjoy a book that deals with like assault and stuff like that, right? But it was a really, really good book. But obviously, like, content warnings for a lot of different things if you're sensitive to abuse, drugging, stuff like that. But yeah, I really look forward to reading more of Tiffany D. Jackson. Definitely recommend this. Okay, and then we have my favorite book of the month, and that was, oh, I picked up the wrong one. That was Flashfire by TJ Klune. This is the sequel to The Extraordinaries, which I just had in my hands. This is a YA fantasy series about this kid named Nick who loves superheroes, and superheroes are called extraordinaries in this world. He writes fan fiction about them. He dreams about dating them. Eventually, he ends up getting actually involved in the drama. This is the follow-up, and honestly, the greatness in the first one just continues. It's a very fun and comedic story. Nick is such an energetic, interesting, funny character, and the romance continues. I do feel like, actually, I wish the romance was like a little bit better in this book, but it still was very cute. I won't say who it's between for spoilers. And then it's also just really fun to read a superhero story. I consume a lot of movies and shows, so it's nice to read a superhero story in a book. There's also really great friendships in this, great LGBT rep as Nick is gay, neurodiversity rep as Nick has ADHD. This book was a little bit preachy. Like, I know YA books deal with a lot of like relevant topics and stuff like that. I do feel like it got a little bit preachy and cringe, but sometimes I have to recognize like YA books need to spell it out for you a little bit. I even found that with Grown a little bit as well. I was like, okay, there could be more nuance in here, but these are for teenagers, so I have to remember that. I still gave it 4.5 stars, so not quite as good as the first one, but I still really liked it. There also was a twist at the very end, which I have mixed feelings on. I always love a twist, so the fact that there was one, I kind of liked it, but I also don't love what the twist was. So a little mixed on that, but still has me very excited for the 3rd and final book. Definitely recommend picking up this series if you have not already, especially if you are interested in any of those themes that I mentioned. Okay, so that is the end of my April wrap up. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have read any of these books and if you have any thoughts. Be sure to subscribe if you have not already. I upload bookish videos every single week. And until next time, I'll see you in my next video. Bye.